Hey, welcome back to The Recap, the video podcast ministry of First Baptist Kettering, where we discuss topics such as our vision and our values and our sermons from week to week. The Recap exists to present content that invites people to be transformed by Jesus. So with that, let's get started. Hey, back in the seat after a little over a month, according to our staff here, reminding us how long we've been around the table. And listen, I just wanted to start by saying I missed being here. It's been a few. Well, that's so nice of you.
I wasn't here last week.
You weren't here last week?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
you guys are getting heavy. I've been carrying you now for several weeks, and I'm glad you're back.
Make the work a little easier for you. Well, you've got the shoulders for it, boss. As we sit around the table sometimes before the cameras start rolling, we have a good time cracking some jokes, talking about the content from what's coming this week. And I know Pastor Chad and Joe, you guys sat down this past week to film, and you gave us an overview of Revelation, gave us some things to consider, how I think, Chad, you said that it's written for us, but not necessarily to us specifically as it's addressed, as we've seen in the first few chapters of Revelation, and some ideas, some things to think through when we look at the book of Revelation. This week, I want to talk through some of the content that we get into from Revelation chapter 1, starting in verse 9. The title for the sermon at both campuses is Preparing for the Victory. So when we look at the content from chapter 1, beginning in verse 9, in your opinion, how hard is it for folks to really see what's here? I mean, Chad, you've got something here about the church being called to attention. Why is that so difficult for us right now as we live to pay attention to what's happening around us and to live with anticipation?
Yeah, I think sometimes we just get so comfortable. I mean, we were actually talking about this in our prep for next week, or actually for a couple weeks from now, that we don't live in a place in the United States where there's this immense amount of physical or bodily persecution. Right?
Okay.
There's challenges and places where there's rub against culture, but in terms of our life being on the line or facing bodily injury, there's really not a lot of that. And so it's real easy for us just to get comfortable and to get in the practice of doing church or playing church or going through the motions of church in our faith. But it's not often that we face a real battle. And so what the book of Revelation does is it reminds us that there is a war that's being waged. There is a spiritual battle that's taking place, and that battle has been won. We see the end result, but not all of those things have transpired yet. And so to me, as I read the book of Revelation, I am reminded of the importance of staying alert, of the fact that God is at work, that there are things happening, of which were prophesied about by Daniel and then again by John, and all of those things are playing out. But I don't always pay attention or see myself or the church's role in what God's doing.
Right. So you mentioned battle, and you mentioned how the church. I mean, our series is written to the 7 churches. Right. We're gonna go through that over the next few weeks. But as I think about warfare, what are some ways, some of the battles that we face? I want to speak about church planting in particular. Some of the things that we've experienced as we've launched the church at Eastmont, David. Some of the things that have awakened us as a team to the things that exist. I mean, as you go to church year after year, week after week, you get into a rhythm of recognizing the same people, maybe missing opportunities to engage with folks, right, and to take the gospel where it needs to go. David, what are some of the things that you've experienced at Eastmont over the past couple of years that maybe were a new or maybe just a eye-opening experience for you, if you will, as to the condition of the world we're in?
Well, one of the things they tell you to do before you plant a church or revitalize a church like we did was to do a demographic study and learn the people you're going to minister to, right? And this kind of coincides with what Chad just got through talking about, the suffering even of the people. Try your very best to understand their struggle and where they are as a community. And I think it helps to be able to, I think we did the best we could, but you don't know it until you jump in there with both feet and you move into that community and you begin to build relationships with folks. I do wish we had done a little bit more of that. You know, over the past 2 years, we've had folks come to our church and share those stories of hardship with us, and being able to identify with them is just really, really important, which really, back to verse 9, I, John, your brother and partner in the affliction. I mean, he was able to identify with the church at Ephesus, you know, all these churches that were being persecuted, and what they were going through. And he was going through his own struggle, being exiled on an island, you know, because of an evil emperor, right? And so just those kinds of things, being able to call yourself a brother. For the last 2 Sundays, prior to church starting, the phone rings in the offices, and it's people in the community that are struggling. What time does your church service start? We need help. You know, we live in that community now, and I want to do a better job of identifying with those people who are struggling and suffering. And
I met a young man who attended a Sugar Creek campus for the first time Sunday, who came up to me at the pastor's table and said, "Hey, can you pray for my dad? He's dying. You know, this is my first Sunday here, and I knew I needed to be in church." And he was just broken up about it. So I just prayed for him and for his dad right there. He's leaving straight from the church to go back to the hospital.
Yeah.
But you don't realize sometimes what people are dealing with, and the you know, the weight of some of the things they're carrying as they come in to the church every week. And certainly I'm not putting any of the things that we're roughly talking about on the same lines of facing death for our faith.
Right.
But they are burdens that people are carrying, and we do want to help carry those. We want to share those burdens with brothers and sisters in Christ.
But it speaks to that first point, Chad. You know, what we had said on Sunday at both campuses is, you know, what gets our attention?
Yeah.
You know, what can God use to get our attention?
That's right.
Certainly the suffering's different. The suffering
yeah.
is for all of us. But
yeah, he can use sickness, or I think I talked about, you know, sometimes it's a cancer diagnosis that gets our attention. Sometimes it's a loss of a job. Sometimes it's a spouse who walks out. We don't know what's going to necessarily happen from day to day, right? There can be things that really that God can use to get our attention. And I don't mean that he caused that to happen, or that he was, you know, wanted your wife or spouse to leave you, but it's in those moments that we find out how desperate and vulnerable we really are. And it's when we're desperate and vulnerable that we really can hear God more clearly.
Yeah. And recognize his authority, which was the second point,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's that being called to attention is the first step to be able to, we offer the same hope to people that John was offering to these churches, these 7 churches. It's the authority of Jesus.
Right.
It's his rule in our lives. It's going to bring us hope and life and peace. It's a universal, right? It's eternal. That's
truth. Because our problem is universal sin, right?
Yes, yeah.
And because we have a universal problem, we have a universal solution, which is Jesus is the only answer to the problem that we're all facing, right? How to broken the center of the world? Sin, right? So what's the answer to brokenness? Jesus. So it just takes different forms and ways over years and cultures and so forth, but it's rooted in the same issue.
That's good.
So the book of Revelation is written in a way that is gripping for a lot of folks, right? It's when you say to your church or your small group or your student ministry or whatever, we're going to go through the book of Revelation first. People show up with their charts and their graphs, or they want to, and they want to dig in and say, man, Revelation draws me into this mystery of what God is. I want to try to interpret the mystery. But we've talked about authority of Jesus, the one speaking as the revelation is revealed to John. But then the last part, which I love so much, we kind of got at it a little bit, recognizing that instead of it being a study of specifically of the end times, which it is apocalyptic narrative, it's calling us to a response that's maybe less heady and more heart-driven, where you said that the book of Revelation moves the church to awe, right? There's this image of John in 17 where he says, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Like he had a reaction to the presence, right? And I think if we would approach, instead of being lulled to sleep in our religion, being awakened in a relationship with Christ where we live in awe every day, I would say that's probably a good purpose for the book of Revelation. Hey, let's awake from your slumber, O sleeper, right? realize what you've believed in, recover some of that, and here's what he's going to do. But he's got to get our attention first. When you think of a church being moved to awe, what does that look like? What would you say practically today?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, as I think about that, I just think about when we come into worship even. I'm just going to make it super simple.
Yeah.
When you come into worship on Sunday morning, are you there all in? Mm-hmm. Is your mind focusing on who Christ is, on what God is doing, that he is worthy of our worship and our praise? Mm-hmm. Or are you thinking about, what are we going to do after church is over? I'm going to grab some lunch. Mm-hmm. Tonight I've got to help my kid with some homework. Does our mind wander? When we're singing the songs, are we really focusing on what do these words mean? Are we thinking about, I don't really like this song. That's not my favorite song. I wish we were singing this other song. Or
did I beat that other group of people?
Right, yeah. But to have a sense of awe is to walk in amazement and in true worship of God. I kind of use the example here on Sunday of, so often I think we've erred on the side of Jesus is my friend, that we have forgotten that Jesus is my creator. Jesus is my God. Jesus holds the keys to death and Hades, right? And so he holds eternity in his hand, right? He is sovereign over all. We lose that sense. And John, of all people, because he's the one who laid his head on the bosom of Christ, he's called the beloved disciple. So he calls himself, I'm the beloved disciple. Right? And yet, when he sees Jesus for the first time, he hears the voice of Jesus for the first time really about 60 years. His reaction is not like, hey, I have totally missed you, dude. What's been going on up in heaven? He falls on his face as if dead. That is the awe and respect that the King of Kings deserves.
And here's another layer to that. Okay, previous to that moment where he's falling as if he's dead. We're told here that Jesus laid his hand on John, his right, and it specifically says his right hand. Yep. And this is just a few verses earlier. It says when it was referring to him, the right hand that holds the 7 stars in his right hand. He had 7 stars in his right hand. Verse 16. So which, by the way, the right hand is always a reference to power and authority, right? And so this right hand of power is also, this is what's awe-inspiring, okay? This right hand that denotes power is also the hand that's placed on John's head. Comforting. Yeah, and fear not. Yeah. Don't be afraid. And here we are in October, that season where we actually pay people to scare us, right? And there's so many things that we can be afraid of. and yet the one thing, death, he has overcome. Amen. And he's saying to John, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And so, yeah, that was awe-inspiring to me. But just the comfort that Jesus brought.
And he's going to do that, not to ruin where we're going, but that's the same mentality he's going to bring to the churches, is don't be afraid. Endure. I know you're facing persecution. I know you're facing trial. I know you're facing death and imprisonment, all these other things. But you have nothing to fear. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the one who holds eternity in my hand, the keys to death and Hades. Right? So he goes on. In each of these churches, he makes new and unique reminders to them about who he is and why he's faithful and why they can trust him amidst their persecution.
Power does not necessarily mean tragic end to everything or something. It's more like an encapsulating, hey, this is who I am, but this is who I want to be for you. This is who I am for you.
The greatest demonstration of power is somebody who can do something, but choose to destroy something, but chooses to be gentle. Yes. The restraint of power is actually a demonstration of power.
It's greater power. Yeah. Yes, it is. So you saw this passed around on social media on Saturday, and you put it out, Chad. It said, the sun will burn your eyes out from 92 million miles, and you expect to casually stroll into the presence of its creator. Oh. Wow.
Yeah. I saw that, and I just said that sums up exactly.
You didn't write that
verse.
yourself?
No, I did not write that myself.
Real life, sometimes we quote other people.
But I have thought about that. A couple years back, we had that eclipse, right? And everybody was trying to see the eclipse, but you had to have these special glasses and goggles and all this kind of stuff. And, to think, hey, we're 90-something million miles away from the sun, and if we look at it directly, it'll rip our eyes out, right? But yet we're going to just stroll in and be like, Jesus, what's up, dude?
Yeah.
We're going to fall on our face as though dead, like John did, because he is truly awe-inspiring.
So let's go to next week. What do we have to look forward to from our sermon from next week? You guys, we just spent some time talking about that. So, and you kind of gave some of it just a minute ago. So if you want to share some more, feel free.
I'm fired up because I love Ephesus. I've been to Ephesus twice, and it is an incredible city. I'm going to try to show some pictures, I think. It's an amazing city. And, like all of the churches we're going to deal with, they had some things that were going well for them, and then they had some things not going well for them. And we're just going to, and that's like every church, right? I mean, we could say these are the things that I think God would be pleased if he spoke to us today, what he would say. And then there's certainly some things that we're like, I don't want to know about that.
Right.
But we need to deal with. But I'm super excited because I think God had a word, and gave the word to the church at Ephesus. And again, that's not written to me or to you, but there are certainly some things for us there that we can learn about God, our church, and ourselves.
And I told Chad the analogy of a secret shopper. That's kind of the picture that came to me as I think about the one who not only stands in the midst of the seven lampstands, now he's walking amongst the seven lamps, and he's observing, and he's going to tell Ephesus some things that are good to hear, and some things that aren't so good to hear that they need to change.
Yeah. God was walking around on Sunday at Eastmont or Sugar Creek. What would he say about our worship?
Yeah.
What would he say about my heart?
Yeah.
That's why I always, before I open the scripture, I always say, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing and acceptable unto you. I mean, obviously that's this reference from the Psalms, but that's what he's looking. He sees the words of my mouth.
Can you imagine?
Hears words of mine, sees the meditation
Can
of
you
my heart.
imagine just for a moment if the churches that gather this Sunday, and as they gather throughout the week for Bible studies, approach that moment with that thought? May the words of my mouth and the meditation search me and cleanse any wicked way in me. You know me anyway. So what would happen if we approached it that way with that kind of that's just a question that I've always got. Man, if I've come in here with some preconceived notion of what this should be like, I'm missing probably what God has for me. So I'm looking forward to this week. Thank you guys for sharing, for spending some time around the table. It's good to be back. Hey, listen, if you're joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us for the recap. If you're coming back to us again, make sure you look down below and smash that like and subscribe button so you continue to get good content from this channel. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you join us in person or online for worship. We look forward to seeing you this week. Let's continue to be the church.